Hello everyone, it's Saturday, and that means it's time to talk a little bit about an episode of an animated superhero television show. Today, I'll be talking about Batman the Animated Series, specifically the episode from the first box set called POV. This episode is sort of the precursor to a pretty well-known episode from later in the series titled Legends of the Dark Knight, where Legends of the Dark Knight features three children each telling their own version of what they think Batman is. This episode features three cops each telling their own version of a specific event and how Batman featured in each story. The event these cops are recounting is how they each perceived the events of a sting they were supposed to be part of against a drug lord. This episode is possibly the most experimental we've seen so far, with Batman barely featuring in the episode at all until the last 5 minutes or so. This is not to say that Batman's presence is not felt. Even though this episode predominantly focuses on the Gotham PD, we still get the sense that Batman is always on the fringe of what's going on in the city, even if he's not smack dab in the middle of an adventure. What's also experimental is that the bulk of this episode happens out of sequence. The episode starts with Montoya and some rookie cop who isn't named as far as I know, and they're on their way to the sting. They arrive to find that the warehouse is on fire and Bullock, nearly unconscious, is outside. Then we flash forward to the three of them being yelled at by some lieutenant who is investigating possible corruption in the police force. This is where we get to see the POV from each cop, and we find out what happened before the episode began in the case of Harvey Bullock, and we find out what happened after Montoya and the rookie got there from their respective stories. Right from the beginning of the episode, I have a bit of a problem with what's going on. If you recall, in my review of the first episode of Batman the Animated Series, On Leather Wings, I had an issue with the way Harvey Bullock was portrayed. I have always liked it when Bullock is portrayed as a good, decent cop who is physically filthy, but is by the book and just doesn't like Batman. The fact that he doesn't like Batman often puts him in opposition to Commissioner Gordon, and Commissioner Gordon is often so just and pure that anyone who argues with him is going to automatically seem like a villain. At least, from where I'm standing, that's what it looked like. Now, Bullock doesn't actually argue with Gordon in this episode, but Bullock is still portrayed as a not very honest cop, which is no bueno if you ask me. I mean, he's courageous taking on three thugs barehanded, but at the end of the day, he lies to cover his own butt, and if things had gone differently, his lies would have resulted in two honest cops losing their jobs. And he also tries to shove his own ineptitude onto Batman in his own version of the story. I'm fine with the idea of an honest cop who just does not like the caped vigilante. Heck, that's the premise behind Crispus Allen, a character in the Gotham PD from the 2000s. But to have Bullock stoop so low, all in the pursuit of getting the audience to grasp the fact that he does not like Batman, is a low blow in my humble. Having said that, the whole concept of this episode, that three cops are each telling their own version of what happened on that night, I feel like it would have been much more interesting if all three cops were lying for different reasons. Montoya doesn't even have to be a corrupt cop to have a reason to lie to the inspector who is investigating the cops. Maybe the rookie messed up, and she doesn't want his record to be tarnished because he was scared and forgot to follow protocol. Maybe Montoya and the rookie really were late. Who knows? The point is, having Bullock be the only guy who is stretching the truth kind of makes the episode feel boring after the first few minutes. I get that there is only 20 minutes to tell the story, and by having Montoya and the rookie lying as well, that would only complicate things, and would no doubt be a story that just could not be told in the span of 20 minutes. But if we see that each cop is telling a version of the truth, but none of them are necessarily telling the whole truth, then that would not only make the episode much more interesting, in my opinion, but it would also make us question Bullock even further. So far, this series has only tried to show us a Bullock who hates everyone and is willing to commit perjury in order to make Batman look bad. But if we saw that these two honest cops were also lying, it would be cause to make us question if Bullock is really as bad as the people behind this show want us to think. As is, the episode starts off much stronger than it does when it finishes. Not only does the episode start off not featuring Batman very much at all, which is very risky and is also a very interesting thing to see in a show that we expect to be all about Batman. Not only does it do that, but after we see the one story that we know to not be true because of what we're being shown, the rest of the episode basically just happens in exactly the way that you would expect it to. We know Bullock's a liar, so if he says that Montoya and Rookie are liars, then we know they're telling the truth. Anyway, after the three cops each tell their story, they're ordered to turn in their badges and weapons. At this point, the episode falls even further, because it really stops being about the cops and the POV, you know, the title of the episode, and it turns into any given action sequence from one of the previous episodes of this series. I don't have a problem with action scenes, at least when they serve the story, but this episode was seemingly built on the tension of the interrogation room and how the GCPD is not united, and how that can affect them as a police force. The action at the end of the episode really only seems to be there so that this episode has a reason to exist. Well, this is a show called Batman, folks, and you don't have him in this episode that much. And there's no fight scenes either. That's gonna need to change. I mean, I don't know if this was a conversation that happened or not, but it does seem like something that would change about the episode because of this line of thinking. So after Montoya realizes where the gangsters are hiding, she goes to find that Batman has been kidnapped and the boss is going to deal with him when he gets there. This seems very convenient. First of all, why did the gangsters bother saving Batman from the burning warehouse? The last time we saw Batman, in Montoya's report from earlier, he was buried under several burning boxes. If the gangsters had left well enough alone, chances are he would have died without his butler to help him, or his computer for that matter. And why have these jokers not unmasked Batman? I get that he might have some gizmo that will shock someone who isn't him when trying to unmask him, kinda like in the movie The Dark Knight, but I can't just assume that he does have something like that if we haven't seen that in action in this series. As far as I know, these gangsters are just idiots who could have really beaten the Batman by revealing his secret to the world, and they are just fools for not doing so. Anyway, the episode happens exactly as you would expect, with Montoya helping Batman bring in an entire gang of 7 dudes, and then Commissioner Gordon manhandles the inspecting officer and gives Rookie, Montoya, and Bullock their jobs back. Happy ending! Yay! I really do think this episode had lots of potential, and clearly the people behind this series did as well, because they sort of returned to this well later on when they did Legends of the Dark Knight. But I do think the episode has some pretty serious flaws that could have easily been fixed. Yeah, doing what I suggested would have made this an almost entirely different episode, but I think that would have resulted in a genuinely better episode overall. I wasn't really around a whole lot in 1992, so I don't know how vicious the people who decided if an episode should air really were. Maybe this episode had to feature Batman a whole lot more in the second half in order to please the mysterious they. And I will go ahead and applaud this episode for not really trying to do a mystery. Almost every episode in this series so far has tried to do a mystery plot, and they usually solve this mystery by letting Batman's computer do all the work. I'm glad we didn't get that here, and I'm certain it's because we don't have much Batman in this episode. So in that regard, this episode was a nice change of pace. Not the best episode of the series, but I've definitely seen worse. And so that's about all I have to say about this episode. I hope this video found you well, and if it did, I hope you will like, share, comment, and subscribe. Also, be sure to come back next Saturday to hear me talk about an episode of the animated Legion of Superheroes series. And in the meantime, come back every day next week to hear and see me talk about other things. I'll see you later.